Did you know that Rolesville had a big slave market? I remember hearing that from former mayor of Rolesville, Frank Eagles, when I met with him after first moving to Rolesville back in 2016. That's the year that my family moved to Rolesville to plant a new United Methodist church there. And I don't know if it was because of being a history major in college or because I thought that, as a church planter, I should probably get to know the community where the new church would be, or both. But I began to learn as much about Rolesville as I could, the good and the bad. So when Mayor Eagles told me about the slave market, I went online and I Googled it. And what came up was actually something that raised my eyebrows even more. That was the first time that I saw the name George Taylor. George Taylor, Wake County's only recorded lynching, happened in 1918 in Rolesville. The good and the bad. This was certainly bad. More than bad. In fact, lynching is just about the worst that human beings are capable of. Completely inhuman, denying and denigrating the image of God in another. Lynchings were public acts of racial terror used to enforce racial subordination and segregation, often involving violent torture and murder with little or no legal consequences. These were not some isolated events, but brutal communal spectacles with widespread state and federal tolerance. The goal was to terrorize the black community, maintain white supremacy, and reinforce a system of inequality. And that's what happened to George Taylor. And that's what happened in Rolesville. And thank goodness for a group of truth seekers and truth tellers who did the holy and faithful work of unburying this story and bringing it to the light. Because that's the only way anything truly has a chance of healing. It must be brought to the light of God's grace and love and justice. When we tell the truth, no matter how painful, there is hope and there's healing and freedom on the other side. As a follower of Jesus, I believe in God's infinite love and grace, giving us the power and the capacity to take an honest and courageous look at the worst parts in ourselves and in the world around us, putting our worst in God's hands. That's called confession and forgiveness, and that leads to healing and new possibilities. There's freedom on the other side. Knowing that God loves us unconditionally and is ready to heal and to transform our worst gives us the ability to tell the truth, even the hard truth about the lynching of George Taylor. And so I'm grateful that Reverend Melissa Flora Bixler sent me an email some years later inviting me, Pastor Tyler, to be a part of this labor of justice, this truth-telling, because as a pastor, I proclaim the truth of the surprising good news of Jesus of Nazareth, who was also falsely accused and tortured by a mob and unjustly hung on a tree. But through his death, he bore our worst, and he met it with his best, the life and love of God. And his resurrection defeated the power of death and means that what is worst is never what is final. And so on the other side of the pain on the cross, we find resurrection power and the freedom and the responsibility to participate in God righting the wrongs, in God restoring and making new, in telling the truth and doing justice. So of course, friends, this is holy and this is faithful work. Truth-telling, especially telling hard and painful truths about our past, is holy and faithful work. Finding articles and researching and interviewing and collecting soil and making pilgrimages to Alabama, writing letters, doing community events, trying to find family members, those family members meeting each other and learning their story that they may not have even known that they carried in their bones, putting up a historical marker, gathering here today. It's all holy and faithful work. It's participating in God putting wrongs to right. It's putting one foot in front of the other in what Parker Palmer calls the tragic gap. seeking to close the space between the way things are and the way that things should be. It tunes our hearts to God's heartbeat for justice. It transforms the past into wisdom for today. It participates in building empathy and solidarity. It strengthens cultural identity, memory, and resiliency. It creates waves of justice to counteract and push back against the ripple effects of lynching. It sharpens our gaze to see the patterns of racial terror embedded in our systems today. And it guides us to being beloved community. So today, believe it or not, like a little over a year after the historical marker went up, we're here together tonight to continue this important work, this holy and faithful work, continuing to learn, continuing to heal, continuing to repent, continuing to co-labor with God for change, because that EJI historical marker in Rolesville bearing George Taylor's name and story is just that. It's a marker. It's not a destination. It's a sign along the long road toward racial justice and equity. It says God has brought us this far, but we still have work to do to be the beloved community God imagines. It's holy and it's faithful work. So thank you for being here as we continue in that work tonight. I'm going to open us with prayer, using some of the same words of prayer I prayed back at the dedication of the monument a little over a year ago. Let's pray. Great and loving God, whose heart beats for truth, mercy, and justice, and whose dream and design is for beloved community. We thank you that because of your grace, we can have the courage to confront the painful truths of our past and present, because we know that your love has the power to transform, to heal, to reconcile. We thank you, Lord, for the holy restlessness that you placed in the hearts of so many students and teachers and community leaders and elected officials. We praise you for the courage and the community it takes to go deep and to research and to build relationships and to plan and to share. We pray for the relatives of George Taylor, as well as all those who live with and experience the tremors of racial terror. We pray that you would surround them and comfort them in the midst of the trauma that is inherited, intergenerational, and carried deep in their bones. God, we lament the sin of racism and the horrors of lynching. We lament that lives like George Taylor's were unjustly cut short. We lament the fear and dehumanization of lynching that rob people of color of their rights, of their dignity, of their futures. We lament the ways in which the legacy of lynching still manifests today, taking on different names and disguises. And we lament the ways in which we participated in and perpetuated the sin of racism in our systems and institutions. But God, we know that you are better and stronger than our worst. We know that your love and life always have the last word because of Jesus, the one who was hung on a tree and who rose from the grave as the beginning of you putting the wrongs to rights. So give us your heart and your dream. Help us to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with you. Sweep us in our continued work up in the great vision of justice rolling down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Help us to see the beauty and the diversity and the people in the world you made and called good. Help us to love our neighbors by laboring for a more equitable today and tomorrow. Help us to cultivate meaningful friendships with people different than we are. And help us by your Spirit strive for that holy and that faithful work of truth-telling, unity, and community marked by justice, equity, and a place for all to thrive and flourish together. May our work tonight be one step further in that direction. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Hi, everyone. So here's a QR code, so if you want to scan it, you can have it on your phone so you can follow along. And I'll leave this up for like a second or two. So today we're going to be talking about some hard history, which we know can be very uncomfortable, but it is necessary. And so we know that our nation has a history of genocide fueled by white supremacy, which we've seen with Indian removal, we've seen with slavery, lynching, the list kind of goes on. And so lynching is something that we're going to focus on today, and that can be defined as the killing of a killing of someone who allegedly committed a crime, and this is without a legal trial. So while lynchings are often kind of thought about as hangings, it can be other things as well. So some modern examples could be like Trayvon Martin or Ahmaud Arbery, just to kind of make that connection to like modern day. But not only were these killings without legal trial, but they were also racially motivated. So between the times 1860 and 1950, we saw over 120 recorded lynchings in North Carolina. And so this was from newspapers, postcards, which were sent as souvenirs, letters. And so we kind of see that these events are tolerated by the government, but also kind of supported by the community. And so today we'll be learning about the only documented lynching in Wake County. So as you walked in, you should have grabbed a source packet and also a graphic organizer. Did everybody get one? And so I also have a QR code if you want to pull the sources up on your phone. So today you're going to be looking at about 9 primary sources. As you're going through the sources, you should have a graphic organizer, and it just has some questions that you can write about as you're looking at them, but you're not required to answer those questions specifically. It's just kind of to start that thinking as you're going through the sources. So again, you have about 9 sources. While you're reading, I just want you to think about some things that stood out to you, dates, any questions that you might have. I'm going to give y'all about 5 to 7 minutes to look through it, and then we're going to come back and discuss what y'all looked at. Okay. Do y'all need another minute or two, or are we good to start our discussion? I'm getting some head nods, so we're good to start. All right, so does anybody want to share any of their like initial reactions after reading the sources?
So I would say that's one. I mean, I've read this before, but the $500, the amount during that time is what stood out to me in reading it today is how that was prompt. You know, people to come forward and whether they knew or not, but that was a significant amount during that time.
She was just saying that it was a significant amount, so she's kind of shocked that nobody spoke out about it because it was a lot of money during that time.
Well, initially they were blaming Langston, or they thought Langston Brewery was the culprit, and then next thing you know, it's George Taylor. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
So I taught this to my class, and they actually had the same question. And so I was like, hey, Shannon, I never knew anything about Langston Brewery. Can you give me some more insight? So would you like to share?
I'm going to go through the whole history with you for about 10, 15 minutes in just a moment. But Langston Brewery was the second person that the mob grabbed. There are two heroes. There are two Wake County sheriffs that heard, it's sort of an Atticus Finch story, but heard what was happening in Rollsville, drove up, and there's this high-speed chase that's kind of outlined in a Durham Herald article. And there's a high-speed chase, and the sheriffs, the Wake County sheriffs, get Langston Brewery to the Raleigh jail, where they hold him overnight, and by the next day, Ruby Rogers is well enough to clear his name, and so then he can go home. But had those two sheriffs not heard what was happening and gotten up there, he wouldn't have survived, which we now know because of what happened to George Taylor.
And you can kind of see a piece of that story in source 2, because it kind of talks, hold on. It says a probable lynching in Wake County was averted early yesterday morning at Rollsville in the northern section of Wake County. So we see that like something was happening, but the story kind of drops off after that. So my next question is, why do y'all think no one came forward, no one wanted to talk about it? Because they said they had 20 people. So why do you think no one wanted to talk about what they saw?
They were all complicit. They all didn't seem to disagree with what was happening, or maybe it's just mob mentality.
Okay.
Retaliation against them.
I don't remember what source, but it said that it was like white and black people who were on the jury. So I think it's a mix of both. Like, one, I'm scared, I don't want retaliation, but also like, hey, I'm agreeing with this. I think this is okay.
Rogers was prominent. The article, when it describes him, it talks about he was a prominent. Mr. Rogers was described in the media. Each time I read it, they made sure to say that he was prominent. And so the media, the source to use fear, when the readers see it, it would provoke fear into silence. So I think his prominence in the community is what drove that.
Notice anything in the source, but who owned the property where the lynching occurred?
From my understanding, it was the Rogers, correct?
No, justice. So this is, I love your questions. When other groups haven't asked these questions. There are a lot of details I did not put in the presentation because we only have an hour and a half. But if you go to our website on the George Taylor page, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, all of the articles, there are over 104 articles that were published nationally in that 3-month period about this. The NAACP called this one of the 4 most important lynchings in 1918, in a 1919 survey of all the lynchings that happened in 1918. There's a lot of layers to this one, but the justice of the peace died from the pneumonia. And this guy, Duke, who owned land, he, landowner, he had aspirations in the county commissioners, as did Leonidas, Ruby's husband, and he becomes a self-appointed justice of the peace. And then within a week, Ruby Rogers, just before Halloween, October 30th, she has made this accusation, but we're not really clear if she was coerced into making it or if she was doing it because she was only 19, her parents didn't want her to marry this man that was in his late 30s, early 40s. He left her all the time. She's out on a farm. She grew up in a boarding house where there were all these teachers that raised her. Her parents had a boarding house in Wake Forest for teachers. So she'd always had lots of people in her life. Now she's 18, enamored by this. Apparently all the teachers turned Leonidas down. And then he woos this 18-year-old, takes her out to his farmhouse. She has no phone, no TV, no radio. You can see. So we don't know if it's postpartum depression. She just had her second baby. He leaves her every day by herself. We don't know if she's trying to get attention and then it spiraled or if they coerced her into it. There are no women characters in any of the newspaper articles. Like she is mentioned, she is quoted, but there is always a man with her when she's quoted, and numerous reporters talk about telling her what to say. So there are like just these layers and layers, and then when you get into the other details we'll talk about in a minute, like who the justice of the peace then deputizes to be it's very similar to what's happening now. So these rogue men are then sent out to go get George Taylor because every time they brought 4 men to Ruby Rogers from their community, sharecroppers, and every time she said, no, it's not him. So I think she probably made this story up, or the story got made up, and it never occurred to her that she was going to be the one identifying someone to be lynched until she got into the space. So that's not even the long answer. I know that seemed long, but it's a lot of detail.
She made up the story. You mean she wasn't attacked or beaten or?
We don't know.
They said that the doctor was called?
Yes, but he was very dear friends with, so that you can look at documents from the time, birth certificates. The community doctor is not the doctor that is with her. Over and over in articles, they describe her in a room full of men. And so it just feels like we just don't know. Like we don't know if she started this, if she had postpartum depression, if they started this. Here's this is the last big detail I'll give you, but then there are many more because this connects to President Woodrow Wilson. But this Tuesday night was an election day, the night he was lynched. This is the week before the election. So this was November 5th, 1918. And it is the first election, I forget which amendment, where the popular vote no longer, or the state legislature no longer gets to pick our 2 senators for North Carolina. So this was the first election, November 5th, 1918, where the popular vote decided who our senators were for North Carolina. So this wasn't the only place where people were being intimidated not to vote. So, and the intimidation started October 30th, but she kept saying, no, it's not him, no, it's not him. So I don't think anyone anticipated that she would 4 times say, no, it's not him. Good question.
I think another thing that complicated it was that there were more people in the mob than actually lived in Rolesville. And so a number of the people who were who participated or complicit in the lynching were likely from outside of Rolesville. So that also made identifying some of the people probably more challenging.
I just thought it was interesting the way that they described their inability to find the the mob, and they said things like their investigation resulted in ignorance in 35 different languages. What? And the other thing, catching lynchers is harder than catching blind tigers. So they had no intent. They had no intent of finding them.
So I guess my last question before Shannon goes through the narrative is just like, how many people had heard about this before today? Oh, before the announcement. So why do y'all think it's not talked about? Because like, this is stuff that we should know. And when I was in high school learning about this, like I had never heard anything about it. And you know, in 8th grade and 4th grade, you learn about North Carolina history. So why hasn't it been talked about? I didn't. I learned about it in high school.
As someone that's recently removed, well, I guess not recently anymore, but removed from high school, I didn't learn about the Wilmington race riots until my freshman year of high school, but more specifically now that I've continued to study this in college, looking at who the archive considers worthy of being remembered, and these people from rural counties, often poor rural counties that are African American, don't have access to the resources that other communities do. So reports don't get digitized and the story continues to get lost. And things like this just happen, and it takes one high school teacher or a group of students to bring a person back into collective memory, but then it takes a lot of work to bring a community back into remembering them. And I think that a lot of people from the generation of teachers didn't learn about this, or maybe were also shared rhetoric and the complicity of racism. And I think that it's just continued to spiral, and now with education being threatened and who is in charge of education threatening what is being taught, I think that educators are sometimes fearful that they will get pushback from their counties and the parents within their counties.
Along that same line, but in a much broader scale, I have a friend who was raised in Wilmington and didn't find out about the Wilmington massacre till she was in her 60s.
Well, surprisingly, I'm a descendant of George Taylor, and none of us knew. I heard about the Wilmington riots, but I didn't know anything about the lynching of my great-grandfather. You know, a year and some change later, I'm still trying to process that a family member of mine went through such a horrible experience. I'll just take that a little bit deeper. Can I just address everybody? Because I feel like, we're in the house of the Lord, so. But I'll just take it a little bit deeper so you understand exactly the miracle that took place with us finding out. Margaret Taylor is my grandmother, and Margaret, I think, was about a year old when this happened to him, George Taylor. So we were in school, me and my sisters were in school, we lived in Durham, and so when you have the students that say they didn't know about it, but we didn't know about it to an extent. When we found out the way we found out, we actually found the coalition. my cousin, who's a member here, I believe her husband's here, sent an email to my mom's niece, and when my mother sent it to me, did you know about it? And I said, who are these people? Did they check out? Is this a scam or something? And when I actually sent the email, did you check Durham to see if there were any? I kind of checked myself to say, oh, that has to be somebody else because we would have known about it. Well, it was us. And so for us, I'm getting into my part. I'm sorry, I'm off the program now, but I just want you to imagine that we didn't know, and that the sense of the miraculous in this horrible death, that the seed that was sown now has brought forth truth, and that's why it's so important. But I say all that just to say that when we were at the marker, it was like a funeral for us. And every time, I've read those documents, those 100 pages, I've read all of them. And this morning, when I look in the mirror, that's why it's important. It's not a movement, but it's allowing truth to be told so that someone else recognizes and it changes the heart. It's really about the matters of the heart. And so I just wanted to say that to you. So again, when I sent the email out and to the coalition, and I think Susan called me. Was it Susan that reached back to me, and I was able to give the names of the direct descendants. And I think somebody kind of chuckled because they were having the marker event without descendants. And the storm came, and because of the storm, it delayed. And during the delay is when I believe Chandra might have saw it or something on your bulletin here, and it prompted her to reach out to her mom, and then her mom reached out to my mom, and then I, with my big mouth, started saying, who are these people? And then we started getting involved, and I believe that there may be pockets of it, but every time I ask my mother, she can't believe that her mom never mentioned it. But she was, that would be Margaret. And then the other part, there's a lot to unpack in it. George Taylor, I have a cousin named George Taylor, and he didn't know why he was named George Taylor until this happened. And his mom was Lily, and Lily went through a lot. Imagine a family is destroyed now. Father, caretaker, we're in these times that we're in. So for me, I'm able to look at and listen to some things that might have prompted where families, when things like this have happened to them. And so George, who was taken away from the family by incidents that happened, Lily Mae, they were all had to survive at a very young age. She had to survive. And so that just prompted other issues. But I want to say that the legacy is why the legacy of it is so important to me, I'll say. And I will say, I believe that it is hard for some members. They maybe don't want to be bothered, or they don't want to hear it. It is a hard truth. It is. And I'm okay with that. But for me, I believe and I know that God has ordained and anointed me to bring forth this truth. So for me, it's about not letting it die, because God did not let that die. It was not buried. That it's not just by incident that they were in classroom, because it's still moving. That's why I know there's purpose in it. The fact that everyone is here and came out, that means there's more that he wants. There's a justice. There's a heart that he wants to turn because of this. And so, did I miss anything? There's a whole lot to it, so. She got this email from this woman.
I know, she's like, I think this woman's really mad at us. And I was so grateful that 6 months before, Betty Murchison, who will be one of our hosts in a second, myself and the Wake County Historical Society president sat down in a Panera, and we wrote handwritten cards to California and to Ohio. We were on Facebook, we were on LinkedIn. Like, we were doing everything we could to find descendants, and that we had followed a whole George Taylor family to the Oakwood Cemetery, but it was the wrong family. And that was Belle was the one who helped us realize it was the wrong family. So when Sharon contacted me, I was like, well, you need to talk to Belle. And I mean, instantly, Belle, like everything, all the boxes checked. So it wasn't hard for us to confirm that this was the family we'd been looking for. And we don't really know together what to do with this, because it's been such a long journey. I'm going to go backwards just so you know. I don't want you to leave tonight and not know a story, and I have been researching this since 2016. So in 2016, I was at Explorers, mostly a math teacher, science teacher, but we did service learning on Fridays, and my son was in my class, I think Will was in that class, but they said they were. And they said, we want to do something about racism, we want to end racism, his two best friends and my son. So we started a service learning project. We got really close with Joe Holt. So over the years, those students put a historical marker in the ground for Joe Holt, whose family was the first family to attempt to desegregate Raleigh City schools after Brown versus Board of Education. Another night for you all. But he was working with us closely. We'd spent a whole year with him. He came back in. It was the second year. And he said, you don't understand the courage my parents had, because you don't understand lynching. Like, you don't know Emmett Till's story. And so then the kids were like, well, has that happened here in Wake County? And and even Joe Holt, like, who's this amazing historian, if you've ever met him, like, he's phenomenal. He didn't know. We didn't know, no one knew. So we looked it up, and we knew it happened to Rollsville. We went to the Red Record, which under the currently UNC Chapel Hill, this summer was required to bring the Red Record down, which was a tool that listed all the lynchings in North Carolina across 50 counties. So we went to the Red Record. All it had was a date, a place, and a name, no death certificate, no details. So we started researching. We started working with local historians. And this is their service project. And the history and science ought to be acts of service, right? So this was their service project. They spent 2 hours every Friday on this project. Ruby Rogers made this claim. Through our research, we interviewed Ruby Rogers' grandson, who lived with her in the summers, never knew. His sister never knew that this happened to her, but she did make up stories about being assaulted 2 other occasions, and we, for a very long time, been requesting one of the occasions from the State Bureau of Investigations, but we've never gotten a response from them. So, but we do know that they were involved in one of those accusations later in life. She also had a condition where she had swelling on her brain that would have to be drained, but she would have psychotic episodes, and that's actually what she died from. But she would have these psychotic episodes. So there's a lot there that we don't know, but we think it's complicated. We think she certainly is not a victim like the Taylor family at all, but certainly oppressed, that she was oppressed in this situation, didn't have power, she was only 18. So there's a lot to be researched there. This is their home in Rollsville, still there. He was taken at the end of their driveway and then brought over to the next property by a stream. On October 30th, that's when the assault was first reported. The first arrest happened that day immediately. Langston Brewery's attempted lynching was Halloween. He was, so he was there longer. I've heard in my head it was 1 day. So he was released once they can assure his safety. So he wasn't being held because he was being charged. He was being held for his safety. And the high-speed chase came down Rollsville, across Nightdale, Wildwoods, that whole, you all, or what is it, Wilder's Grove. Wilder's Grove, and then into Raleigh. So there, a lot of detail. We have some maps that some of our members have made. The reward was announced because she kept saying, everyone they brought to her, she would say, no, that's not him. So now there's this reward, that's the day before. And then they go and arrest George Taylor, who we do have him in the Rollsville census. He was a farmer. He was not literate, but Georgiana, his wife, was literate. And they went to Wilson. There was a township, a Freedmen's Township called Taylor Township in Wilson. They went there. One of the articles tells us that the Wilson chief of police tried to stop them from taking him. And the chief of police and a deputy from Wilson tried to stop them from taking him. 2 deputized citizens, the Justice of Peace Duke, it was his car. They took the train over, they beat him, put him on the train. They then got off in Nightdale, and then tied him to the front of the car where the judge, who was from England and very critical, the judge described it in the court filings as paraded, that they paraded him around, and that the judge was very not happy that they could not get a single witness to identify a single person in the mob. So there are people who really were pushing back and fighting this. The judge was one. The solicitor Norris, actually, I always thought it was a sham, that he didn't really try, like this whole grand jury that happened later. But we spent a summer, Belle, with the Wake County Historical Society, and I, going through every article and annotating them. And we discovered that Solicitor Norris was the first district attorney, which is what a solicitor was, the first district attorney in North Carolina to prosecute prison guards, plural, and win. So I think it was 1916, but Rollsville had a prison camp, an all-black prison camp, and the men were being beaten. It was between Rollsville and Wake Forest, and Norris prosecuted and won, and guards went to jail. White guards went to jail for abusing black prisoners. But it took us like 6 years of research to get to this point where we realized there were a few people really trying to do the right thing in this, trying to land on the right side of history in this horrific story. I'm not going to say anything for the next slides, but I think it's important that you all read it because we are on the 107th anniversary because of what is happening in our world. I think it's important that we own that this is what humans can do if we're not accountable. It's not the next slide yet. But he was intercepted, brought on a train, 300 gathered he was brought into Ruby Rogers' home, where there were many men described. The Durham paper was one of the best newspapers for kind of giving a different perspective, separate from the NNO, which was owned by many of the papers were owned by Josephus Daniels at the time. And if you don't know about 1898, this was the same playbook, how the newspapers were used. So this was pumped out in 104 newspapers in a 3-month period across the nation. California, Philadelphia, Florida, it's insane. And so Josephus Daniels ran this news line through, and this is also the end of World War I. He was the Secretary of Navy, and people were not happy with him because more people had died that summer on the naval ships on the way to Europe than died in battle because of the influenza. So again, Secretary of Navy Josephus Daniels owns these papers. We have an election. We're electing senators with a popular vote on November 5th. And he then, who's in D.C. with President Woodrow Wilson, manipulates and uses the papers again, same playbook, exactly 20 years later. Both occurred in the fall 1898 and now 1918. Lots of same players. We have the articles if you want to get into it. So this is. Brian Stevenson was here 2 weeks ago. He's the founder of EJI, Equal Justice Initiative, and created this community remembrance project. And so that every county that has a lynching can create this coalition or community remembrance project. We're not a 501c3. We're just volunteers who got to know one another because we didn't sit right to not be a part of something that did something different. So as volunteers together, our first step was a soil collection. We created these pilgrimages to EJI, which we run one every December. So we have one coming up December 4th. Raise your hand if you've been on one so folks can come see you and talk to you. So a number of folks here have been on one, or you've been with another group. Yeah, on your own. Yeah, whether you go with us or go on your own. The essay contest is, we're not there, we're a group in progress. That hasn't completely happened. The historical marker happened last year. And then the last piece is the steel monument, those hanging steel monuments. There are 2 at EJI. One stays there hanging in their National Peace and Justice Memorial. And one goes home, is sent home with the county who has kind of worked through all these pieces. I was one of the original teachers working on this project. So my students started this work. This teacher, 2 months in, calls me. He's like, hey, people in Montgomery, Alabama said you're working on this. I'm working on this with my high school students. Tashema, who was our speaker, was a junior in high school? A senior in high school. She was one of the original students that first year. So they were researching in Middle Creek High School. And yes. And my 8th graders at Explorers were researching with me, and we were sharing. My students had the ability, we were a charter school, we had a lot of flexibility. We could go up to Rollsville, we did interviews, and they were finding deeds and able to navigate government sites and important things that we 8th graders didn't want to do. So then we all got to meet in Rollsville. This is Rollsville's town hall where we met. That's our first year. The next year we did a soil collection. EJI does a soil collection from the site of the lynching, and too much to talk about, but it's really powerful. We did find the land, identify the land. We found it through oral histories in Rollsville, and Matt's class, Matt Sheldon at Middle Creek, he and his students found the land through deeds, researching deeds, and they found that it traced back to the Justice of the Peace of the time, Duke, the Duke family. The Woodliff family, I'm outing, they owned the land, but now they don't, so I can out them. And they agreed to let us come on with metal detectors, and they agreed to collaborate with us. They were in their 80s, the parents, their parents, Charles Woodliff, his father bought the land in 1933. And I think they came in from Ohio or California. His children, who were in their 40s and 50s, did not feel comfortable having them, these 80-year-olds, out on that land in rural Rollsville by themselves and having this information go out into the public. It was, this is in 2019, and they demanded, with a very stern letter, they worked within the school system, Matt was in the school system, and so at that point, we kind of left that alone. So the Woodliff family's name was kept quiet for their safety. They have since sold the land. It's being developed now, and we're navigating developers hoping to get on the land with metal detectors in the next couple of months. But one of the students, and I don't know this, remember the student, but one of the students in that meeting we had said, since we weren't allowed on the land anymore, said, well, what if we create something where people send in their soil from all over Wake County, and share their stories of racial terror. 400 people, so then the kids drafted this over the summer. We had these meetings over the summer, all these kids working with some folks from the governor's office. We had pastors, we had a rabbi from Bethel. Working together, they wrote a Citizen's Promise, which is on our website. If you go over to Engage, the Citizen's Promise, and 400 people in Wake County participated, and about 300 sent soil, 400 just signed the Citizen's Promise, and so we had this sort of amalgam of soil. If you go to EJI and you ever find George Taylor's soil, everyone else has soil from the site. Our soil is this mix from all over Wake County that's very distinct. It's easy to see our jar. But EJI approved, and they really liked the idea of this sort of community soil project. So then your soil, the soil kind of, it is a way of communicating, we know the truth now. We know where the land is, we know who was involved. We still didn't have descendants at that time, we were trying, but we knew where the land was, we knew what happened to them, we knew some of the players, we found articles. So that is the truth piece. And then there's the remembrance. So we took the soil and delivered it, and people that signed the Citizen's Promise. And then the truth moves into remembrance. And so this was Sharon's part, but I'm glad that you spoke. Next time we'll know which order to put things. But the remembrance, and so, and then if you want to come back up, because I'm sure you have more thoughts on that. But Sharon called, and then, yeah, I mean, we're just so grateful, like so grateful, because I think a lot of us thought, okay, the work is done for us. There wasn't much more we could do once we got the marker done. But now working with the family and learning through them, their experience, and there's so much work to do that I would never have imagined, but because of our conversations. So we continue this week. We were supposed to do an OLLI workshop for NC State OLLI today. Much like the red record coming down, NC State did not feel comfortable hosting us because of the climate of today. And so we were grateful that Soapstone invited us here to have this event. So the Duke OLLI is taking a group of 40 this spring on a 4-day trip, and we're helping them plan that trip, and that'll be March 12th through 15th if anyone's interested. And Burroughs Welcome had their president and their program director, Alfred Mays, here, Dr. Mulia and Alfred Mays, if anyone knows them, traveled with us last December, where Betty and some others did their magic. Holly was there. And they gave us $35,000 to take Teachers of the Year last year. And so last June, we were able to take 40 Teachers of the Year to EJI Montgomery, Alabama, and then from all over the state for the last 5 years. And then, and Estrella, your teacher was on our trip, so now he wants her to go, so he is helping us get her on our trip this December. We just found out from Burroughs Welcome, they're giving us a second $35,000 grant to take another group of teachers in April. So that kind of catches you guys up on where we are. We find that the pilgrimages are really important. Connection to each other, always some idea. This came from Bill, who came with us. It's very organic, what we've been doing. So I'm gonna bring up, Betty's gonna facilitate, and bring up Sharon, so then we could just ask you direct questions. And we're gonna bring up, Susan is our co-chair. Yeah, you come on up. Hallie is our she was the second year on the project. Do you wanna come up? And Tashema, and these were students from Middle Creek. I don't have any from Explore Us. And I'm gonna hand this over. Tyler, do you wanna come up? I've done a lot of talking. Yeah, come on. So we each joined at different times. Actually, do you want to stand here? Sure.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, I'll be your helper.
So you may feel like you've been drinking from a fire hose, right? It's a lot of information, especially if you're new to it. We really appreciate everyone showing up and being here tonight. And what we'd like to do is to see if anybody has any question for this panel to ask. Our students have been involved in it a very long time. Their experiences are very valid. And Susan, who's our co-chair, holds it all together somehow and facilitates our meetings and keeps things moving and keep us connected. Shannon is the founder and genius behind it all. Tyler is our spiritual leader. And Sharon, as a descendant who wants to face the truth, as she just shared with us, she's taken a year to really become absorbed in this and to learn as much as she can. So I think everybody's open for whatever questions that you might have. Okay. Somebody have a microphone in the audience? Okay.
Was Mr. Taylor's body ever recovered and given a final resting place?
I think I can answer that. We have one member of our committee who's not with us, Derek, who has been looking for the burial place, and as to my knowledge, he's never found it.
Yeah, we had Derek Verstegen. He is the vice president of the Rolesville Historical Society, and he's very close to the Jonesville community. And not only have we not found his body, there's no death certificate, and there should have been by I think it's 13 or 14, North Carolina was requiring death certificates for all persons. Previous to that, only white persons had death certificates, but after like 1913, it was required for all. One of my groups of students later on did research on all of the North Carolina lynchings after that requirement for death certificates. Less than half of the lynchings that happened in North Carolina have death certificates. So it was common not to.
Thank you.
So because of that, we do have there is a photo that we've been trying to find. But because of the circumstances around the body and not having any documents is one of the reasons why it was important to me that we try to develop some type of family foundation to give him a face. And collectively, that's one of the reasons why, to give some sort of image to that.
Very good. Thank you. Great question. Other questions? Yes.
Do you have any idea how old George Taylor was? Because they said this first person was 30 years old. His age showed, I would have thought he might have been a much older man at the time of this event. Do you have any idea how old he might have been?
I think we have him at 28, because I think in the census, I have the census here. So this is the 1910 census. Does it say his age here? It has the kids. 22?
Yeah.
So he was 30 then.
So this is for George Taylor's descendant. We may never know, and we probably can't know this, but what is your opinion about why this was such a secret? Do you think it was pain or shame, or what? I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are.
I would say initially it was started with fear from Georgina. And Georgina's silence was the safety for the children. And that silence passed down to keep that. It was a very dark, as you see, experience, and I believe that. I believe my grandmother, might have mentioned it to one of her children, but as a conversation of it happening, it was not, we did not know.
And
So I believe that was her saving her children.
It was protection too, I believe, because to have to leave in the middle of the night with your children and whatever meager belongings you had, and you didn't want to be found because it was not unusual for whole families to be lynched, women and children, and with a crowd of 300 angry people, she did what she needed to do, I think, to protect her family.
Well, I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. You've thanked us, but I mean, your courage for being here and not being afraid to tell the truth is really appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another question right there.
The bullets, there were so many bullets. Is that something you could find with, she mentioned metal detectors? Is that what you're hoping for?
We were hoping to have access to the property before the developers moved in with the bulldozers, and there was the tree we felt would have contained bullets in it. But now when I passed there recently, it looked like they had cleared the land, Shannon.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but Matt and Derek are concerned because they had said we could come through there. The tree was taken out in the 80s, the actual tree, according to the owner, because when he started farming the land, some local person walked through the land and pointed out where you ought to know, a lynching happened here story. There are lots of stories that we've learned over the years. Betty's been really essential to facilitating those conversations because they're so painful. But there is another story in Roseville, and that family, we had multiple meetings, and it's more recent. Everyone's still alive, except for that family member that died at the hands of police, and they don't feel safe. But we did some work investigating, and it is a real case that ultimately will come out. Another case story, the Lynn Council story in Apex. Lynn Council came forward and shared his story, how the police chief of Apex hung him and he was saved. In the 1950s, he came forward, he heard about our work with George Taylor, felt safe, and contacted Matt, the teacher in Middle Creek High School, and came and talked to those students first before he talked to anyone else to tell his story. And later you might find it in the news, but the Apex Chief of Police took everything in the police station that had that police chief's name. A brick out of the ground, plaques, anything that had that chief's name was taken out, and then they threw Lynn Council this really beautiful, I think it's 90th or 100th birthday party. So eventually the whole community rallied the mayor around Lynn Council in his 90s, and that is one of the pieces with Equal Justice Initiative is you have this truth seeking, you have remembrance, which is I feel like, when I started this, I thought it was a project, we'll be done in 2 years or a year. And I mean, the remembrance piece is gonna take a lot longer. And then the final piece would be reconciliation, which I don't think any of us say very often. I don't think any of us feel like we're anywhere near reconciliation. But the closest example I have is what happened for Lynn Council in the Apex community. If we wanted to know what reconciliation looks like in Wake County, I don't know if Lynn's family feels that way, but the way he revealed himself, the relationships he built over time, Matt's students, another generation of students did a video about him that you can watch on our website.
And I will say, people have a right to fear. The marker that was put up in September, by December, it was already an attempt made to destroy it. And it sits on Main Street in Roseville, when you're driving through Roseville, right across kind of across from the elementary school. You can see it. And there's not, it was placed near a gazebo kind of structure, and there's not a driveway that leads right to it. So whoever tried to knock the marker down had to drive up onto the grass and the curb to try to push it over. So fear is very real. And the story of my family that Shannon was referring to, in 1968, when public schools integrated here in Wake County, for some reason, the decision was made to integrate the buses first. I lived just yards away from where Sharon's great-grandfather was killed, and we stayed down a long path, and some folks got very upset because the bus from what was then called Vaden Whitley High School, now it's East Wake High School. The bus from Vaden Whitley would pick my sister and I up. We were only two black people on the bus, and take us to Roseville Elementary School, and then we'd get on a bus, a black bus going to Du Bois High School, where we were attending school. And that didn't sit well with people, and somebody put a stick of dynamite in my dad's mailbox and blew it up. And when I discovered where Mr. Taylor was lynched, it is literally just a few yards away from where this occurred. So racial terrorism doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. And there have been other incidences that my family experienced when we lived there in Roseville, where even the highway patrol, you're fearful because you don't know who to trust. One night we were coming home from majorette practice, and as I came through the stoplight, the only stoplight at that time they had in Roseville, the highway patrolman pulled me over on a dark little country road, and he said my dad, I don't know what the excuse was, the tires were worn or something, and I had to leave my father's car side the road, and we were about 2.5 miles from home, and it was night, and I knew my parents would not appreciate us having to walk home, and I asked him, what were we supposed to do if we couldn't drive the car? He said, well, your father's friends with the white couple that lives up the street at the Rock Quarry Road where Roseville High School is now. And he said, they're friends with them, right? And I said, well, yeah. He said, well, I'll go tell them. So he went and told my daddy's friend, John Tank. Him and his wife came and picked us up and took us home. And I've never heard some of the words my daddy used that night. And I was really happy that my mom and his best friend talked them out of, they wouldn't let him go anywhere. But the message was, we can get to your children. And I mean, you cut people off at the knees when you tell a father that I can harm your children. And he was a mechanic, and they had just started doing inspections on cars, where you got to check the lights and all that. And he had to turn down some white lady's car, and they were angry about that. And that's why they got back. That was their get back at him. So, it's amazing when you connect threads and you can see that there is racial oppression, racial terrorism, and what forms it takes. So I know it's not about me, so I'm going to move on to the next question for this great panel. Does anybody have any other questions?
So I'd like to know from the students what it was like actually being a high school student and studying this, and how it's impacted them to the point where they're now teachers or working towards that end. And also I'd like to hear about how Roseville has kind of responded to the work that's been done by Wake Truth, and we see that the marker's been put in place.
Yes, so I can start. My name is Hallie, and I was part of, I guess, the second group that started doing the George Taylor research. I'm not trying to become an educator, but I will say that it's vastly altered what I study. I'm a senior at UNC right now, and I'm actually writing an honors thesis on a woman named Eleanor Rush, who was killed in the women's prison when she was 17, under very similar circumstances and just issues of erasure and these hidden histories that we have continued to uncover over the years. But when I was first in high school, it was just a set of newspaper articles and I guess some hope. And then last year I was lucky enough to go to the erection of the monument and to meet George Taylor and to meet you and to meet his descendants. It's continued to just reaffirm that we did the work for a reason, but it really also does make it real. And at UNC, I've also been lucky enough to take a course called the Descendants Project, where we also get in contact with other descendants of victims of lynching. And that process has continued to be like this one, life-altering, because you're talking to these people that likely share a history not too far different from ours. I'm sure that my family has similar stories that are untold, which is one of the reasons I like to do the work, because if you're a person of color in America from the South, you likely have a story like this. But it's just continued to be, I can't impact what's happening right now in the world, but I can continue to look at what happened in the past and bring light to that. So that's why I've been motivated to keep doing it.
For me, taking the class I took African American literature, and that's where we learned about George Taylor. But for me, it's probably one of the reasons why I became a teacher, and so I tell Sheldon that all the time. But taking the class, I was like, I've never learned anything like this before. I didn't know, about lynchings, I've never been taught that before in high school. So we actually spoke with the school board and talked to them about kind of incorporating more Black history and heart histories into schools. And so I just knew going into teaching, I wanted to make sure that my students knew that information when they left my class and when they left my high school. Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of stuff.
So Shema's part of a professional learning team. We asked Wake County if we through the Legacy and Lynching Conference last spring, which was the first, Betty was one of the organizers, and Hallie was also an organizer. We met a woman who writes curriculum. She wrote these lessons, so what you did tonight, for us, for free, because she was so compelled to help us. And Matt and I have been teaching this. I'm a math teacher, actually, and Matt is the high school English teacher. And we're too close, and we couldn't make it simple. We were making it way too hard, and we needed an outsider. So she made the lesson. We are trying to roll the lesson out. The current climate is not a good one to roll this out because federal funding gets withheld. And so instead, what we've been told is to have 5 pilot teachers. So here we have a pilot teacher who did the original research. I'm a math teacher, so I can't be one of the pilot teachers. And Matt is an English teacher. He can't be one of the pilot teachers. So it's been really interesting. So we've started this PLT. The only teacher that's been able to get all the approvals within her school to teach this lesson has been Tashema. Everyone else is struggling, yes. All others are struggling, so we really appreciate her leadership in moving us through this work.
You said something about Roseville?
Yeah, maybe we can
Yeah.
tag things. A couple of things. I think, I don't know what's next, Bill, for Roseville, and is part of the answer. With the monument being up just over a year, I think it's a fair question to ask, what now in terms of the continued work in the community and making it is in a visible place. It is in Main Street Park, but I think simply it being there and people reading it is kind of step one. I would love to see more frequent opportunities like this for the community of Roseville to learn about this. I do know that some of this work continues, and Shannon can probably share more about the work that Derek is doing to really honor and preserve history of Jonesville, which is a historically black community in Rolesville. So there's that. And I don't know, I don't want to speak because things have changed, but I know that at one point the goal was for the steel marker, the Part B, Part A is at the Legacy Museum and Memorial. Part B would be, the plan originally was for it to go into the future library in Rolesville. Rolesville's finally getting a public library, to go in the library in a dedicated room that also tells the story. So some of the ongoing stuff in Rolesville is still to happen, particularly with hopefully the monument eventually coming to the library there and it having its own room, like with a opportunity for people to do the history, read the history. Is that still,
Vicki Adamson, one of our county commissioners, she went on one of our pilgrimages, and she's going again with Jessica Holmes this December, and she's championed this. And it is, the library bond was passed. There's $2 million in the library bond to create a historical reading room in the Rolesville Library, and it's still happening.
Susan, would you like to invite people to be a part of our organization and to say a few words in the end?
God is speaking through you, though. I was just thinking that. I think I wanted to add that when I got involved with this group, it was after I'd gone down to the memorial and after the first time Trump was elected, and I was feeling really bad about life. And so went down by myself, and the genius of that experience is that you can be connected to people from your own county when you go back. And that's how I met Shannon and Matt, and was just really just sat and observed for several years. It was just life-giving to know that students were leading this work, honestly. And I think it's valuable to note that that marker being on Main Street in Rolesville and this marker being approved in the library bond, happened because our elected officials went on the pilgrimage. And so the town of Rolesville, the mayor, town council, Sheila Sutton, who was a council member, they all went, and after coming back, they were changed. And they voted unanimously for that marker to be put in a public space. So it is really life-changing and life-giving. So I know this seems like a lot, but I would offer, if there's just one thing that you'd like to do. How many people have been to Alabama yet? Okay, come again, come back with us. It's very cost-effective. I would just invite you to join us if you'd like. December 5th and 6th, just one overnight, yeah, we would love to have you. And as Shannon mentioned, there's another opportunity in March, but.
Thank you. Sharon, would you like to have the last word?
I would say that.
There's a microphone.
Yes, I would just like to say to follow your heart in the cause. One of the opportunities that the family has is that we can make it possible for a student to give back. I think it's the least that we can do is to help to provide an opportunity for someone else their heart to see truth. So thank you.
And Sharon and her family has created the George Taylor Foundation.
Yes, and we provide scholarship for students to attend it in December every year.
She can give you more information if you're interested in
Yes.
contributing. I want to thank the panel, and as the minister's making his way up to give us our closing prayer, and we've acknowledged some of the team members who aren't here with us, but I want to give you a few words from Brian Stevenson, who is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. I went to his appearance in Durham the other night, and he said, we have to engage in narrative work. And I can't do it with the fire he did. But he said we have to challenge and change the narrative to counter racial injustice. He said, we start with the way indigenous people have been characterized as savages. Their history was erased and they were treated unfairly. Just as the greatest injustice of slavery was the narrative that was created that still exists today. The false narrative that blacks are less capable has led to social hierarchy. These presumptions create barriers for us, especially in the courtrooms. Brian challenged all of us to stand up when they say sit down, speak up when they say shut up. He said now is the time, and that hope is our superpower. Thank you, panel. Reverend.
I'm going to offer a closing prayer, but before I do, one of the most remarkable things about this is to see the work of God in the connection between these people and the stories and what they bring. The truth is hard, and it's hard for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that people have different pieces of the truth, and it's hard to put all those pieces together in conversation and connection in ways that are healthy and healing and transformative. When I came to Soapstone to build a little bit off of the story that everybody might know all the pieces to, I had no idea the connection that we would end up having with Wake Truth and with this entire project. I just came one day and Bill pulled me aside and said, hey, they're gonna do a marker to commemorate George Taylor, and Joe and I are going. Do you wanna go? And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. The one person that was lynched in Wake County. And so I went home and told my wife, and she said, oh, I'm related to a George Taylor, and I think he was lynched. And it snowballed, it grew. And I guess the takeaway is that in a climate where we currently live in a world where the truth is under attack, where it is difficult to put the pieces together because there is actively forces working against it, it's good to know that you're not in that fight alone. It's not just about the people represented here or the groups that they're a part of. It's not just about you, and thank you so much for coming out, but it's about the work of a power that's greater than you, that is struggling to make the truth known. Because the truth, in all of its devices and pieces, is what we ultimately need to set us free. Let us pray. God of truth and justice, we come before you with heavy hearts remembering George Taylor, a man whose life was taken in cruelty and hatred, whose name was nearly lost to silence. We grieve the violence that scarred his body and the injustice that scars our community. We confess that too often we have chosen comfort over courage, forgetting the pain of those whose cries still echo from the dirt. Yet we believe that your spirit still moves among us, healing what has been broken, revealing what has been hidden, and calling us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with you. Give us the strength to tell the truth in every place, at every time, in every person's face, to honor the memory of those who suffered, and to build a future where every child of God can live without fear and die with dignity. May our remembrance today not end in sorrow, but rise in commitment, so that we might be repairers of the breach, peacemakers in our time, and witnesses to your redeeming love. I offer you now this benediction. Go forth from this place as people of memory and hope. Carry with you the name of George Taylor and all those whose blood still cries out for justice. And may the God who grieves with the oppressed strengthen you, the Christ who suffered unjustly guide you, and the Spirit who breathes new life empower you to walk in truth, seek reconciliation, and labor for a world made whole. Go in peace to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Amen.